Hey, this is Gabrielle P coming to you from the Rogue Valley in Southern Oregon. I am an SAT and ACT test prep tutor, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about the difference between live tutoring and just taking a course online. So one of the main differences that, well, yesterday, for example, I worked with someone who was really good at the grammar points, but completely unfamiliar with the language of 19th century texts, and who had some challenges with being able to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words from context because she was not someone who used to read as a child. So the terminology used in 19th century texts often has vocabulary that we use today, but we use it differently. And so it's easy to be misled. And when I was looking around for resources on this, there's almost nothing. So this is something I'm uniquely qualified to help people with because I have been reading since I was a child, and I have a bachelor's degree in French language and literature, a master's degree in writing fiction, and a certification in teaching writing from MMSU. So this is college level. And the whole point of the SAT and the ACT, which students don't necessarily understand, is that the colleges need some way to make sure that you can swim if they throw you in a college course. And that's what these tests do. So one of the things I teach is how to use context to make estimated or educated guesses around what the meaning of a word is so that you can answer the questions correctly. And I come at this from the point of view of linguistics because I'm also a lifelong language learner. And in foreign countries where you don't necessarily have, but perhaps, an eighth of the grasp of the language, you have nothing but context. And so this is something that you get really good at if you're a language learner. So that's two strikes against these high school students in terms of the ease of learning. If they've never studied a foreign language and they haven't read much at all, they're lacking the cultural references, they're lacking the idioms, the intonation, and you can't get the intonation from a book. So here's a tip. The best way to learn how to understand 19th century texts is to listen to books online in an audio format, which have been read by professional readers who are providing the right intonation. Because not only do you have the story to guess from, you also have the intonation and the inflection and the emphasis of the reader. Whereas if you're looking at a book, it's pretty much flat. You have context, but it's much more challenging. You don't have as many clues as when you have an audio version of a book. So that's why when I teach little mini courses, I actually offer the text and I offer an audio version of it. Now, many of the texts that were written in the 19th century, you can find on YouTube with read by good readers, but not all of them. Some of them are not well read. So it's also important that you find a reader whose voice you enjoy. So not, if it's an annoying voice, you're not going to learn from it. But it's something that you can do while you're relaxing, while you're doing something with your hands, doing dishes, doing laundry, taking a walk. It's an effortless way of learning more vocabulary. And that is not emphasized enough in the study of SAT and ACT. People say, oh, well, all the vocabulary is in context. But if you don't know how to learn from context, or if you have a sentence that is being referred to and a question, both of which have a word that you don't know, then it's hard. It's much, much harder. So growing vocabulary is easy to do if you listen to a lot of books on tape when you're just relaxing. And it is a relaxing way to learn for sure. So the other things I wanted to address just quickly before we quit, let's see. Yeah, the test is not a test of knowledge, it's a test of skill. It's a test of, can you hold your own in any college classroom? So do you understand the question types? That will help you process faster. And the dilemma that college students face is that their workload triples. So If you get a tutor to help you learn to read faster and find information faster, you can get your homework done faster. And so that's a huge boon for, and while I'm not a huge fan of studying, of standardized testing in general, if you study for these tests, it really makes a difference in your processing speed, in your reading speed, in your ability to find information quickly, get your work done so you can have a life. And let's face it, the point of education is to enrich life so that you have more free time for yourself. It's not to become this endless marathon of work. And when your workload triples when you go to college and you're just not prepared for it because no one told you and you don't really have the skill set to read more quickly and process information more quickly, you're just going to spend hours and hours doing homework. So if you need special help in this area, I wanted to share the screen because I wanted to show you something of what I'm talking about. Another tip is that you can go to projectgutenberg.org and they will provide texts that were written in the 19th century free of charge because they're out of copyright. So for example, Oliver Twist, written by Charles Dickens. This is an excerpt I took from chapter 7, and you can see, well, first of all, the spelling is funny, right? The words underlined in red are antiquated spellings in some cases, or British spellings that we as Americans might not recognize. So it's good to just be familiar with the fact that that's a thing. I'm just trying to come up with, oh, here, this word, it talks about a beetle, and this might totally throw off a person. So one of the things that you need to understand when you're working with 19th century texts is if you don't understand a word, you have to sort of detach and try to see if there are other words in the sentence that you understand, because the mind will sort of grasp onto what you don't know and keep thinking about it, and that will get in the way of your processing what you're actually reading. So here where it says, Mr. Bumble, cried Noah with well-affected dismay, and in tones so loud and agitated that they not only caught the ear of Mr. Bumble himself, who happened to be hard by, but alarmed him so much that he rushed into the yard without his cocked hat, which is a very curious and remarkable circumstance, as showing that even a beetle acted upon a sudden and powerful impulse, may be afflicted with a momentary visitation of loss of self-possession and forgetfulness of personal dignity. So if you just read that, it might be lost on you if you read it from a book silently, not familiar with the intonation of how to read it. You might think, you might completely miss that there's humor here, that there's a little bit of satire, actually, of this self-important person. And you may not know what a beetle is, but the background of this story is that this is an orphan, like Charles Dickens himself was, who ends up in the workhouse. And so the beetle is one of the people who watches these boys and makes sure that they are on task because they use them to work. That's why it's called a workhouse. And the other thing that's so interesting and so important is just understanding these cultural references. If the next generation doesn't have any sense of history, they're doomed to repeat it. And so I think this book is interesting from the point of view that it shows that they used to lock people up if they didn't have any money. They don't do that now, but just understanding where we've been and where we are now, it contributes to so much. But really, my focus is on helping students understand the kind of texts that they'll need for the SAT. And this is exactly the kind of, just a short example of the kind of thing that comes up. So if this sounds interesting to you and you like the style and the flavor, let's talk on the phone and get you going. I'd be happy to work with you. All right, bye for now.